One of the most important things to define when developing a video game are what we as developers call the 3 C's of game development: camera, control, and character. These three elements are really important because they essentially define how a player interacts with the mechanics of a game, and therefore shape the player experience. Today, I'm going to share what they are and how you can leverage them to improve your game's player experience. Successful game studios like Nintendo and Ubisoft always focus on the 3 C's first when designing their games to make sure that their games feel the best they can before they start creating levels and mechanics. We see this in games like Super Mario 64 and Rayman. In these games, they made sure the movement and camera felt great before moving on to anything else. The first C stands for character, and as we know, starts with character design. When you design your character, you need to consider their traits in relation to the story or the gameplay you are trying to portray. One example is when Sega tried to take on Nintendo, they came up with the idea of a game featuring a fast and cool hedgehog, and thus Sonic was born. This is also portrayed in the game when you're running around the levels, collecting rings, and spinning around at fast speeds. Imagine this game with a boring or generic character. It wouldn't be the same. One good trick to tell if a character has a good design is to use their silhouette and see if you can distinguish them. For example, in here, I think we all can agree that this one is Mario. Once you have your character traits and design, the next thing to look at are the metrics. Metrics are really important because they allow the player to know what is and isn't attainable in a game. For example, when you're playing Super Mario Bros., you know what jumps you can't and cannot make. That is because the designers that created the levels know the exact units or pixels Mario can jump. Some of the metrics the designers will need to define are the height of the player, the walking speed, the running speed, jump distance, jump height, melee attack distance, projectile distance, etc. A lot of these metrics will depend on the type of game you're making, but it is very important to define them, as it will save you time when you start designing the levels for your game. The second C stands for camera. As we know, there are a lot of different types of cameras in games, like first person, third person, isometric, top-down, etc. It is very important for you as a designer to choose the correct type of camera for your game. For example, a first-person camera is more immersive, while a third-person camera allows for a better view of your character and the entire world. Also, some types of games, like platformers, require precise camera views in order to make certain jumps. If your game is 2D, there is not much you can do, but if it is 3D, you have the option of giving your player full control of the camera. However, do this with caution, as this can cause some clipping issues with level geometry. One thing to keep in mind is that the camera should always work as a sort of compass for the player. This means that we need to ensure it will not get in the way of the player's objective. It should always be able to show points of interest for the player as well as what's important in the game. It shouldn't distract from the gameplay experience or cause the player to fail at the game because of it. The third and last C stands for control, and unlike the others, this one applies for every game out there, and thus is the most important one of all. When you design the controls for your game, you have to take a look at ergonomics, which looks at the design of products and their efficiency. If you are designing an experience meant to be used with a game controller, you need to think about how the player will intuitively hold the controller, and what button they will press when trying to take that specific action. Otherwise, they will become frustrated and immediately stop playing the game. Another important aspect of control is not only related to input, but also related to how it feels to control the character. This is more abstract and harder to get right. The idea is that when you are controlling a character, it feels good, simple, and almost natural to control them. What I mean by this is that when, for example, you are playing Mario, you know that the controls are not getting in the way of what you're trying to do. You can jump, you can flip, you can bounce, and all of that feels so good to perform. The last thing you want is the opposite experience of a game, in which you thought you jumped, but the character just didn't jump, or when you tried to turn to the left to evade an obstacle and you got killed. It just doesn't feel the same. The weight of the character will vary depending on who you are controlling. As silly as it sounds, it is very hard to get it right, which is why companies like Nintendo spend that much time working on this phase. Thinking about the 3 C's and having a good foundation for your game means that the player will be able to become more immersed in the game, and not worry thinking about how to do things in your game. On the contrary, they will be more invested in the story and gameplay loop, thus fully being part of the player experience. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. What has been your experience with the 3Cs? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. See you next time!